Well, g'day everybody. It's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and welcome to AOPA Live. This is for Tuesday, the 14th of February. Be happy Valentine's Day to everyone right across the aviation industry. That's what you needed, a Valentine's greeting from Ben Morgan at AOPA. But nevertheless, we didn't really pick the day too well today, but we've got a good program ahead of us and some great topics to chew into. And also a wonderful opportunity this evening to introduce you all to Marc Sibun. Marc is one of our new directors at AOPA Australia. He's a bush pilot, he's a Cessna 182 owner, and he's a straight-talking, down-to-earth guy with some great ideas towards getting general aviation moving and also helping the association do exactly what Paul Rushton spoke about last week, which is get supercharged so that we can really have a solid year of advocacy towards a better, stronger and more sustainable aviation industry. Well, as the excerpt says on Facebook this evening, we're going to be doing this interview with Marc. But before I jump into that, I just want to cover off a thank you to our lovely senators from the National Party, also from the Liberals and the Labor Party, and also the independent senator from the One Nation Party. And that would be Bridget McKenzie of the Nationals. It would be Slade Brockman out there with the Liberal Party, and also Malcolm Roberts from One Nation, and Glenn Stirl, who is currently the new chair of the Senate RRAT. And the RRAT committee, which is the Rural Regional Affairs Transport Committee, convened a hearing last night. They had CASA before them, they're asking them questions. That process is obviously getting underway now, and those meetings are going to start to get a little bit more interesting as time goes on. And already the senators have been reaching out to AOPA and saying, Ben, let's have a conversation about what the key issues are across the aviation industry. We need to be raising these and making sure that there's some accountability. And it's great to have those senators supporting the association and carrying those messages forward. So I do extend to each and every one of them my sincere thanks for not only the work that they've done over the last 5 years that I've been here at AOPA, but for the work that they've committed to do moving forward. So thank you, everybody, for that support. Now, as I said, we have a very special guest with us this evening, is none other than Marc. Marc, g'day, and welcome to your first AOPA Live.
G'day, Ben. Happy Valentine's Day.
Well, mate, I didn't anticipate sitting with you for Valentine's Day, but I tell you what, a great opportunity nonetheless.
It could be worse, mate.
It could be much worse. Now, I guess, Marc, maybe the best place to start is why don't we delve into a little bit of background from yourself? Give us an overview of what got you involved in aviation and how you're currently involved in aviation, of course, what brought you to AOPA, and I'll have some questions for you throughout. So over to you.
So I guess my background in aviation started in the mid-90s when I the early 90s when I was actually working on a cattle station out west, and a fellow by the name of Stuart took me on some mustering flights, which got the bug. I then did a little bit of, I did about 11 hours in the mid 90s. Was about to go solo, and then there were a couple of events that just, I guess, brought it to a halt. There was a guy on the neighbouring property had a stall spin accident and died, and then a very, very close friend of mine, his father was involved in the last fatal accident in Hoxton Airport, which basically was the nail in the coffin of Hoxton, I think, aside from the subdivisional potentials there. But a mate of mine's father died in that, and then my then wife and life just got in the way. So I had a very long hiatus from aviation, albeit it's always an interest. I think you're always looking to the skies, as they say. I picked it up again in about 2017, and got my RPL now and have a 182, and the rest is history. I fly it around as much as I possibly can. I'm on track for 200 odd hours a year. I've flown it up to you guys. Park gets in the AOP hangar there on plenty of occasions. I do a bit of work in Sydney, and I spend a lot of time in the bush. Most people recognise it. It's an extremely polarizing aircraft. I think it's the only yellow and brown 182. Definitely in the country.
It's certainly a very bright colour, Mark, and
look,
there's no missing when you arrive.
The yellow is good. The brown, I'm not exactly sure what was happening there, but anyway, everyone assumes that I'm a Hawthorn supporter, but perhaps the guys in Bankstown who painted it Hawker were. But anyway, it's not the case. But yeah, look, I fly. I try and do off airport stuff as much as I can. Obviously, you need to fly in and out of controlled airspace and major airports every now and then. But I do a lot of bush flying. I enjoy it. It's the reason why I bought the 182 and set it up. And I guess harking back to that, I've always, I'm a fitter by trade, but I've spent my entire life on and off in different capacities working in agriculture, and that's that I guess forms part of a foundation stone in why I do what I do and the type of flying that I like to do.
And Mark, you've also used the aircraft, and it was one of the first opportunities I had to meet you. Actually, was when you were organising to fly away as part of the Royal Flying Doctor Service fundraisers. Could you tell me a little bit about your involvement with that?
Yeah, interesting. Look, the air race for the RFDS, it's a great concept. It's more geared to the social aspects of it, whereas I'm more of a, as we've sort of discussed, a bush flyer and get away and just, have a bit of fun. But I think the air race was great. It was, and all credit to the guys. It's a major undertaking to orchestrate that. COVID got in the way, and everyone was in the starting blocks, and then wind come out of the sail completely, and you've really got to pick up that enthusiasm and run with it again 12 months later, and it's not entirely different. What we're having to do with the AOPA now post-COVID is to just breathe fire back into something that everyone's really excited about it and pumped, and the air race was the same, and then that fell over. And look, it was a enjoyable time. I think there's about 50 hours in the air. It was certainly an excellent impetus to go to some of the really remote parts of Australia and have a great look around. Thoroughly enjoyed some low level over the coast and looking at animals and fish and sharks and crocs, and it was spectacular.
Guaranteed you would have seen some amazing country, and I've seen the flight routing for the air race numerous times, and it really just takes you over some terrific locations. Just before you jump in and respond to that, if you're tuning into the broadcast this evening, we do invite you to put your comments and questions in. If you have a question for Mark during our talk, throw it across. We'll put it up on screen, and he'd love the opportunity to respond. Likewise, myself, if there's any issue that you'd like to cover off tonight, do not hesitate. Put it in the comments, and we'll do our best to respond. Now, Mark, obviously, air race was a great opportunity for me to meet you, and then shortly thereafter, we started some conversation about what AOPA was working on, because you were out there amongst the flying communities, talking to people at grassroots airfields about the need for protecting our aviation industry, and why people need to be supporting AOPA and rallying those troops. Could you talk a little bit about your experiences?
Yeah, well, I think I probably I do certainly identify as a bit of a redneck, and I think it's to put that into context. I think I probably identify as someone who's a little bit more grassroots, someone who's just like I'm a tradesman. I'm not an academic. I'm not someone who can articulate a fantastic argument and sit in Parliament and fight the fight. Like, I'm the guy who will go out there and talk to people and connect with people in an agricultural setting, in a trades related setting. These guys that aren't professionals, and it's no criticism against the professionals, and this brings me to the whole. I think some of the context that we spoke about was we're trying to get the fire back into AOPA. It's not all about Ben Morgan, and it's not all about one particular person. And Ben, all credit to you. I love you dearly. Sometimes you can be polarizing, and I think that's a really good thing. And I think it's great that you have this capacity to go in there and fight the arguments. You're sitting in front of the right people, talking about, Part 67, Part 45, the White Paper. You're in there, you're banging your head against the wall. And I think I can't do that. And I think it's very important that I recognise that I can't do that. And I think vast majority of pilots that just want to fly, they don't need the politics and the arguments and the pushing and shoving. But what they do need is to get behind people like you, organisations like the AOPA, and create, strength by saying, well, recognising that we can't go in there and do these things. I'm not going to go to Parliament. I'm not going to drive to Canberra and convince senators with a really compelling argument. But you know what I can do? I can put my money where my mouth is, become a member of AOPA, go out there and rally other members or other pilots to become a member of the AOPA, so that in turn we can support you and support other key directors within the business that are fact finding, that are going out and getting all of this freedom of information documentation, compiling all these arguments, really, and then provide some feedback to these guys that are on my level to say, well, this is the outcome. This is what AOPA has actually achieved. And this is what they're working on now. And this is where we're going in the future. And I think that's really where I see myself within this organisation, and trying to re-engage with guys that just want to fly planes.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mark. And I'll give you a break. The big thing there is, it takes a chorus to achieve a positive result. People tend to see me as AOPA, but what they forget is there's 11 or 12 directors sitting behind the scenes, each doing something, contributing and working away. What they also fail to see is the plethora of individuals that I'm engaged with on a daily basis that are helping behind the scenes, advocating, going out to government ministers, going to local councils. There is this enormous body. At this point in time, I'm just a face. I'm a spokesperson. I'm a representative of the work of the organisation. And so, it was refreshing when I got to meet you, and you saw that, and you also saw the other side of the challenge, which is that, and it's something we can all relate to. If I walked into a room of aviators from Australia and I asked the question, how many of you have been to a local airfield and you've walked up to a group only to hear people in the group bashing on somebody, trashing somebody, rumouring, making comments about someone, about so-and-so is this and so-and-so is that. And then if you drill those people, what you tend to learn is these people have never met the person they're talking about. They've never actually engaged with them. They're parroting some obscure comment that someone might have made, and it's been Chinese whispered and turned into 1,000 things. And I get very frustrated by this. And in fact, I was talking to, I'm not going to name him, but I was talking to an industry commentator yesterday evening on my way home from work. And this very issue came up. And I said to this person, because he said, what's the most frustrating thing you think you've dealt with in the 7 years you've been doing this, Ben? I said, the most frustrating thing is that I believe that the message that AOPA is trying to project about a strong, positive, sustainable aviation industry, the message of reform that drives an increase in participation and opens the industry up, the message that clearly is arguing for the rights of pilots and the rights of our aviation businesses and enterprise to be in business and have a place in this industry, often gets lost because people tend to play the personality politics of whether they like Ben Morgan's face, whether they like what Ben Morgan said, or whether they thought I was being too pointed in my conversation or too arrogant in my conversation. And it just gets lost. And I find that incredibly frustrating, because the realities are, and I've actually asked this of some people who I've come up against in the past, why would you want us to fail? Why would you want AOPA to fail? Why would you go around telling people not to participate and not support? Why would you want the organisation that's fighting for the very best possible outcome for our aviation community to fail at this task? Even if you didn't like me, or you didn't like our policy, or you didn't like something we were saying in one particular area, it must be understood and it must be appreciated that the vast majority, the largest quantum of the work that we do is actually really beneficial to the aviation industry. And that is what's worth the $159 to support, in my opinion. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm a pretty pragmatic type of guy, and I just look at the end goal. If AOPA can succeed in ushering in medical reform that brings thousands of people back to the aviation industry, why wouldn't you support it? If AOPA can be successful in bringing about regulatory reforms that bring us into alignment with the world's most successful regulations, why wouldn't you support it? To me, this is all common sense. This is stuff we should be getting behind. So, Marc, I really appreciate our first meeting, and I've very much appreciated your input from a perspective of AOPA's board and governance and management, and it's been really refreshing.
Well, I mean, it's only upwards from here, mate. We've got some work cut out. We've got, we've discussed this ad nauseum. We've got a lot of work to do, and now's the time to do it. I think we've got a really good crew. The new board is great. And there's a really good opportunity ahead of us to capture a lot of these guys that just want to fly planes. And particularly that's my focus, is to just find guys, within clubs that just want to fly planes. They care about the industry. They care about reform. They care about promoting general aviation in general in Australia, so that it's not, choked out to a point where, change becomes irrelevant because it's so prescriptive and punitive, and no one can actually, afford to fly or own a plane or meet a medical.
Well, Marc, I'm going to touch on some of these statistics in a moment, and I'm going to gauge your reaction. I've put together just some what I would consider to be some really headline key performance indicators for Australia versus what I continue to say is the world's most successful, complex and diverse aviation economy, which is the US. But before I touch on that, you actually had some really good news this afternoon, and behind the scenes, you and I have been talking about how we as AOPA re-engage with aero clubs, and we regain their support and the support of the memberships, given the work that we're doing on medical reform is just so profound. The work we're trying to do on engineering and maintenance reforms will also deliver serious relief. And hey, I'm just going to have a little shout out for me here. I tirelessly worked my backside off for 6 years to get the Cessna SIDS program repealed for private operators. And I think I spoke myself blue in the face. I took it in front of 4 Senate hearings, wrote several submissions on the issue. And, Pip Spence came along and became DAS. And in short succession, she did honour a commitment, and she rolled back Cessna SIDS for private operators and has saved private owners of Cessna aircraft tens of thousands of dollars from having to comply with overly prescriptive SIDS that ultimately are ideally suited for commercial operations, because we want the absolute highest levels of possible safety. But in the private realm, some of these SIDS can be managed more effectively over a period of time, so that the owner is not being buried in bills come annual time. So that was a huge landmark achievement for AOPA to get that roll back.
As a Cessna owner, thank you.
Mate, I got told, every single person said to me, Ben, this is never going to happen. You are wasting resources. Don't do it. And I was like, you're wrong. We can change these issues. You just have to be committed. You can't give up. You can't give these people a reason to say, okay, well, he's stopped now, we'll just forget about it. You've got to be that pain in the ass. You've got to be that squeaky wheel to keep the attention. And I'll hand it to you for comment, but I remember Senator Susan McDonald saying to me, she said, Ben, you are so incredibly influential in some of these issues, because she said, you are just like a terrier. You just don't give up. And she said, what it does is it forces the issue to be on the agenda. And she said, there are so many issues going on that it could be pushed downstream, but because you're there and you're just totally relentless, it gets elevated to it so that it actually arrives sooner rather than later. And that was also backed up by Anita Taylor. And I'll just put a huge shout out to Anita. Anita's a former board member of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, and she went on to become the aviation advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce. And I worked closely with Anita on a range of issues during her entire term working with Barnaby Joyce. And Anita, only this past Sunday, she called me up and she said, have you got the fire in the belly? You're going to be, you're really signing on to do another few years of this. And I was kind of going, oh God, like this is it's just such huge effort, energy, work, the whole lot. And I was kind of saying, maybe my time has come and gone, and maybe I'm just not going to get these reforms done. And she said to me, Ben, wake up. you have been incredibly influential for AOPA because you demand that the issue be discussed. And it's just when you start hearing it back from people and you realise the work we're doing is changing the system. We may not get CASA's credit for it. They will never turn around, in my opinion, and never say, well done, AOPA, you forced us over a barrel and got the change. But if we weren't there doing it, I guarantee you Cessna SIDS would be still sitting in there today costing owners tens of thousands of dollars. Over to you, Marc.
Yeah, that's why you're here. That's why, we've got to. Sorry, you're going to have to excuse my voice. It will probably fail me in the next 20 minutes or so. But I think that's why we need to re-engage, to reconnect with the grassroots pilots out there, because we aren't Ben Morgan. And there's a lot of people, and unfortunately, and we've had this conversation, it's a popularity contest. Sure. It's a lot of, and I like you, Ben. I've spent a lot of time with you now, and I think if these knockers actually got off their ass and spent, had a beer and a feed with you like we've done, they would see a completely different side to Ben Morgan. And I think, I need to get that message across to the people, and I don't want to. I'm not trying to pump up my own tires here to think I've got a great platform and a great following to do that. But I can. I had a conversation with Linda Baylarts today from Bendigo Flying Club. She was my CFI. Me flying partially is her fault. Sorry, Linda.
We know who to blame.
Hopefully it's not a blame game here. But look, I think, I had a conversation with Linda, and Linda's committed to coming back on, Bendigo Flying Club as being a member again for the AOPA. We had a conversation about organising a night for you to come out and meet some guys, some guys that I don't know. I've been a lot of people may not know, but I've been a member of Bendigo Flying Club since 2017. Most probably don't know me. I mean, a yellow Cessna. They've all seen that parked out the front. But I think it's a start, and that's you are influential. You are a dog with a bone, and I'm not trying to pump your tires up now, but we need to recognise that I have strengths. But one of my weaknesses is having that capacity to getting myself in front of, senators and politicians and the key people, the decision makers, and, constantly chewing at their heels, constantly formulating these really strong arguments, and that's a weakness of mine. I acknowledge that. So what's a strength? Go out, get some grassroots pilots, get some of the guys that just, as I said, plenty of times before, that just want to fly. We just want the freedom to go and have a fly when we want to fly, and I think whatever the format is, and whether it's, whether you're in general aviation or you're in, recreational RAOs, it's about being supportive of the only organisation in Australia that has the capacity to go out and fight the fight on behalf of aircraft owners and pilots.
Well, that's it. And I've said this for years, mate. We are unashamedly for aircraft owners, pilots, and aviation businesses. We have no dog in the race. We're not a self-admin. We don't make money out of our members. We do everything we do to support our members. And I've got to be honest with you, we do an amazing amount of work on ether. We make, it's an old saying my grandmother used to have, and that is you cut you're cutting your dress according to your cloth, and that's exactly what we have to do at AOPA. We don't have big budgets. We've got to make a little bit go a great distance. And I think we've always done a great job of it, but we could change that as well if we got broader support. Now, listen, we're short on time, and I promised I wasn't going to spend a great deal of time because people would know this. You've just got over COVID. Is that right?
Yeah, literally getting over it right now.
Okay. So, righto. So let's just have some quick discussion around a few issues. Leading up, obviously an issue that I've brought up time and time again, and people always say to me, Ben, you're always referring to this US system. And I go, well, think about it. Really go and have a look. You'll see the FAR AIM sitting right behind me there. That's going to feature in every video because I am a believer. But I just want to run through some facts. I mean, you'd agree with me, wouldn't you, if I made the statement that the US Federal Aviation Administration is the world's largest, most complex and diverse aviation regulator? Would you believe it?
100%.
Right. And what underpins that, and not a lot of people would know this, is that general aviation, that is general aviation, not regional, domestic, international aviation, but really private recreational general aviation, and what is encompassed in general aviation business, being your GA charters and all the rest of it, it represents $150 billion of US domestic economic activity, $150 billion. And it has created 7.6 million jobs in America for aviation. Having a rule set that is designed to work, that supports its aviation industry. And trust me, there are areas of the US FAA rule set that we could all point to and go, they're not perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect, but what I am saying is, just based on runs on the board and track record and history, the US FAA rule set work. And we only need to also look at what the US aviation industry has produced. I think it was Dick Smith once said this, and I use it every time I give a talk somewhere. At a time when Australia was building the Nomad, the Americans built the space shuttle, right? Let's just keep that in perspective. We built a Nomad, they built a space shuttle. They know a few things about aerospace and aviation technology and development, and they have a rule set where it was born, it was fostered, it was cultivated and developed. Okay, so by comparison, we have an Australian regulator here. Do you know how many staff work for CASA here in Australia at all? Would you like to take a punt?
50?
They have 860 odd staff, according to the last data I was able to get a hold of.
How many of those work in AVMED?
Yeah, probably all 865 of them. But they got about 860 odd staff. It could be more. I might be wrong. It could be more. However, do you know how many staff? Do you know how many staff the US FAA have nationwide? No. They've got 42,000.
Yeah.
Right. They've got a staff resource that is larger than the total number of recreational, general aviation and commercial airline pilots here in Australia by a margin. They have a depth within their organisation which is just phenomenal. If we look at the FAA and we look at the people who have headed up the FAA, we're talking about highly experienced test pilots, people who have flown the certification programs for jet aircraft, for airliners, people who have been chief executives of major international airlines. The people who have headed up the FAA are by no small measure supreme aviation professionals, people who have managerial experience working in organisations where their staff workforces are in the tens of thousands, and of course a government regulator with 42,000. That is something to really think about. The depth of experience that drives the US FAA is profound. And if we compare that to Australia, and this is no offence to Pip Spence, but Pip, as a Director of Aviation Safety, is a career bureaucrat. She's a bureaucrat who has earned her career in the Department of Transport, working portfolios within the department and climbing that ladder, and then hitting the jackpot and being shifted across to CASA and being made a Director of Aviation Safety. But she's never flown an aircraft. She's never run an aviation business. She does not have that core aviation experience, the common sense aviation experience that she can fall back on to know whether the people around her are leading her astray or leading her to success. And I think that is something that has been going on with CASA for a long time. And I say this absolutely clear. I'm not impugning Pip Spence. I'm stating a fact. This is just the facts. And so if you were to stand Pip Spence on an international stage and then bring in her FAA counterparts, there is a huge differential in experience, operational experience. You know, and that old saying, you don't know what you don't know until all of a sudden you do know it. Okay, another statistic that I think is going to blow your mind. How many pilots do you think we have here in Australia that participate in general aviation?
Flying in general aviation,
recreational and private general aviation. So we're going to exclude your regional, domestic, and international airline pilots. We're just going to look at general aviation being, everyone up to general aviation charter and whatnot. Just a round number? What do you reckon?
It'd have to be 10,000.
Well, the best number that I can get to, and I think it's being very ambitious, because I think it actually might be far lower than this. I believe, personally, I really believe it's only around 15,000. We can't get the data because the data doesn't exist. But what we do know is there's approximately 36,000 pilots, and I reckon if you take out your airline pilots, you might have a number of around 25,000. I think that's being very optimistic on that number. Okay, so in Australia, 25,000 in total. How many pilots in general aviation and recreational aviation in the United States?
It'd have to be a couple of million.
It is 500,000, right? Half a million.
I actually thought there'd be more pilots in the US.
Well, so did I. Well, there are, but we reduced that number down. I think there's approximately 600, 700,000 pilots in total. But if we take just the general aviation pilots, there's 500,000. So the US Federal Aviation Administration is looking after 500,000 pilots. That's 500,000 pilots medicals, 500,000 pilots concerns, right? Just think about that. Keep that in your mind, right? Now, how many general aviation aircraft do we have here in Australia? Take out your domestic, international and regional airliners, take out, anything that's completely esoteric. Let's just look at core general aviation and recreational aviation. How many registered airplanes in Australia?
Well, wasn't it around 10,000?
We have approximately 9,000.
Yeah.
Now, according to the Bureau of BITRA, Bureau of Information Transport Regional Economics, according to the government's own reporting, almost 50% of Australia's registered aircraft in the general aviation sectors are no longer being flown. So that means from a registered aircraft fleet of approximately 9,000, there are only around 4,500 aircraft flying. Now, how many general aviation aircraft, recreational and general aviation aircraft that are actively and flying in the United States?
Oh, wouldn't even hesitate to guess.
Just under 200,000 aeroplanes. 500,000 pilots, 200,000 active aeroplanes contributing to their economy. It's a huge contrast, right? Let's have a look at another one. Flight schools. In Australia, how many flight schools do you think we've got in the general aviation community?
100 or so?
It's below 100 flight schools. And over the last 10 years, or 15 years, sorry, the number of flight schools has declined.
Yeah.
Conversely, in the United States, in the last 15 years, the number of flight schools has grown year on year, and they have just short of 1,000 general aviation flight schools active across the United States, and they have the world's largest population of independent flight instructors that provide nearly 75% of all flight training in the United States is conducted by those independent flying instructors. So whilst there are 1,000 flight schools, there are literally thousands of independent flight instructors. Now, I'm working to try and get that exact number, and when I get it, I'm going to report it, because these data metrics are actually incredibly important in understanding where we sit with what we're being given from our regulator in Australia. Now, this is an interesting one. And this relates to an issue that has come up in the Senate Rural Regional Affairs Transport Committee meeting, which happened yesterday. CASA was before the committee and the senators were asking questions, and the issue of pilot medicals has come up. Now, this is an issue that's very close to my heart. This is one of the principal reasons I got involved with AOPA. I want to get the medical system reformed in this country to bring thousands of people back to general aviation, to bring business back to maintenance companies, to bring business back to flight schools, to put food on the table of hardworking small to medium-sized businesses, to give those hardworking mums and dads that are running those small to medium-sized businesses a future, and to give them a superannuation, and to give them a life's reward for a lifetime of hard work and effort in supporting our aviation industry. That is what I am trying to get done in getting this reform through, with the support of our board and the support of our national membership. And so back in 2016, when the US Federal Aviation Administration took a look at their own general aviation economy, what they found was they found something very similar to what's going on in Australia. And that is, we're living in a time where government bureaucracies are turning into monsters. Think about all the different bureaucracies we deal with on a daily basis in our lives that today, after decades, have transformed into, paperwork behemoths that now control so much of our lives and regulate us to such extremes and have imposed unnecessary fees and charges. Well, aviation medicine globally in Western countries has been doing the same thing. And what the US found was that aviation medicine within the US FAA was actually starting to cause decline. They were unnecessarily grounding pilots. What was happening? The US aviation medicine was doing exactly what CASA's done. They've transformed themselves into a bloody medical scientific research centre, treating pilots like guinea pigs, having pilots undertake a plethora of invasive and in many cases non-invasive medical testing because they are data logging and analysing and using our pilot community to come up with complex reporting that then justifies them having further restrictions on us and further people in their medical departments. And then so what happens? They start bloating. And before you know it, we're all being crushed by a bunch of pontificating doctors in an AvMed department who think that they're smarter than everybody else in the world, grounding pilots that go on for many years to continue driving cars, driving heavy machinery and being productive in society and life, but being stopped from participating in aviation because a whole team of doctors got themselves all worked up over some hot data and decided that they were smart and that this was a great outcome. Now, the US decided to hose that down and said, well, we could actually pull back from this. We could allow pilots to deal with their own general practitioners. We could allow pilots to fly if they hold a valid driver's license. Sure, we need to put some conditions around it, but they introduced basic med. And since introducing basic med 5.5, 6 years ago, 88,000 pilots are now flying on that medical standard. There are now more people flying in the United States on the reformed basic med standard than we have in general aviation by a factor of 3. Right? Now, I want you to think about that number, 88,000 pilots. We have 25,000 at best. I reckon 15,000 pilots at worst in general aviation with 4,500 aeroplanes. And our regulator in the last 6 years has told the Australian Parliament and has told the Australian aviation industry and has told the Australian people that it's refusing to deliver on this because they know safety. And so I think it's been pretty curious because some of these senators are starting to wake up to this, and I think what they're starting to move towards is a question to CASA. You've actually economically damaged the aviation industry because you haven't moved forward on these reforms, and you've caused the industry decline. Now, interestingly, Pip Spence in the hearing last night, when being drilled by Malcolm Roberts on COVID-related health issues, and AOPA's not buying into that particular debate, but I picked out a very curious and interesting response from Ms. Spence to the Senate. And she turned around and she said, Senator, we only decline 100 medicals per year. Therefore, we don't believe we are being unreasonable with our medical policies. That would have to be one of the most disingenuous statements ever given to the Australian Parliament. CASA may reject 100 medicals per year, but how many people over the last 25 years have walked away
from aviation
because they are fed up with paying $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a year for continuous medical testing to go and fly a private aeroplane that is really no different to flying a private car? And where did these people go? They went to RAOs. And RAOs grew from a couple of thousand pilots to 10,000 pilots in a space of 20 years, and general aviation has declined. You can see they do this. Because the total number of pilots in Australia, according to CASA and according to the data, is not actually growing. We're stealing from Peter to pay Paul. And so when the Director of Aviation Safety sat in front of a Senate inquiry and said, Senators, CASA only rejects 100 medicals a year, our aviation medicine policies are fair, that is such a gross misrepresentation as to what is going on. What the Senator should have asked is, Ms. Spence, how many pilots are currently by CASA review? How many pilots each year does CASA require additional medical testing from? I'm really interested in knowing that statistic because I think that statistic's going to be a lot larger than anyone gives comprehension for. And it explains why there has been such a groundswell of people to say, to hell with this, we've got to get out. We're tired of it. Now, as the Senate inquiry went further, she was asked another question. And I found this particular question probably the most offensive in her response of the lot. And Senator Malcolm Roberts asked her, giving an example of a pilot who had kidney stones. He went to a urologist. The urologist gave him laser treatment. The kidney stones were cleared. There was some minor kidney stones or remnants remaining. It was decided that to go in and do surgery was so risky that the urologist and the specialist said, no, we can't recommend that because it's just too damn risky. You're at no health risk as you stand. The situation is totally and thoroughly under control, and there is no reason as to why you are not going to contribute as a healthy, ordinary human being for many, many, many years to come. So the specialists write their reports. It goes into CASA. CASA override and refuse to issue the medical. Now, how many times have I heard this particular story? I've gotten so tired of hearing this story. Members coming to me saying, Ben, I did my medical, my specialist, I've got the best specialists in the Southern Hemisphere, and some faceless bureaucratic doctor in Canberra who's never met me, who's probably never even had a conversation with the specialist, has overridden the specialist because AvMed know best. Now, the Senator said, what this is doing is this is driving pilots to give false statements with respect to their health conditions, because he argued there is a perverse incentive for pilots not to be honest on their medicals. And he asked Ms. Spence straight up, Ms. Spence, do you believe there's a perverse incentive given the example I've given? Absolutely not, Senator. She looks at the camera. Absolutely not. Well, I'm going to call this one out. Pip Spence, I like you, but if you are honestly going to sit there and you are going to look to camera and you're going to say that under no circumstances there's a perverse incentive, you thoroughly do not know what you're doing, and I am absolutely appalled, because this does exist. This has been going on for a long time, and the paperwork we as AOPA have generated over the last 6-7 years patently proves it to be correct, and it's something that's not new. She's aware of this. These issues have been raised, and so I'll be contacting Senator Roberts. And I'll be inviting Senator Roberts to start reviewing, with the approval of our members, start reviewing many of these medical cases, because this is where the system is broken. We have a regulator in Australia that does not even know, at the head, does not even know what's happening at the tail. Yeah. And how do we fix these issues when I go and I sit with the Director of Aviation Safety and I say, look, all these problems are happening, and she looks at me with a blank face and says, oh, that can't be true. I'm sorry, but this is exactly what's been going on. It's been going on for a very long time, and it needs to stop. So I really do thank Malcolm Roberts, Senator Roberts, for raising that particular issue. I found it interesting that in the absence of the PMO at the hearing, the questions were being punted across to Marcellus, Andre Marcellus, or whatever his name is. He's not a doctor. He's the head of stakeholder engagement. Why is he answering questions on behalf of CASA AvMed? Right, seriously, why is he doing that? Right, and it's actually a real shame that CASA have got that process happening, because it just shows that CASA are more interested in gold plating their responses by making it look like they know what they're talking about than actually backing it up with qualified people who can speak to the issue. And so I'd be encouraging the senators to get the PMO back in front of that panel and start doubling down on these issues, because this is real. Pilots have been discriminated in this country for far too long, and CASA have had 6.5, 7 years to fix this problem and introduce medical reforms that would follow the basic med reform and introduce to Australia a successful deregulation, a successful reduction in red tape, a successful removal of unnecessary impost, and a motivation to get more people participating in aviation, which kickstarts our aviation economy. Instead, they're refusing to do so. And I've got some theories on why I think they're continuing to refuse to deliver these reforms. And I think it stems entirely from their desire to do everything within their power to provide an unfair advantage to the recreational aviation Australia. Now, I'm not seeking to impugn RAOs. I'm speaking to have a conversation based on reality. Our regulator for too long has abused the general aviation industry by delivering regulations that have unfairly disadvantaged the general aviation community in order for CASA to financially stand up this self-administration model that they've created in partnership with this private company. And you only need to pick up that far aim to realise that for many, many years now in the United States, pilots can enter the US system, they can get a sport pilot licence, they can even become a sport pilot instructor by only having a sport pilot licence and accruing some hours. They can register recreational aircraft types on their November system. They can work on those aircraft under the November system, and that the medical frameworks exist under the November system. It is aghast that we continue to propagate the great lie that the only way that you can do these things is to go to a private company and pay fees and charges for something that should exist under core regulation. After all, if you read the Civil Aviation Act, it states that CASA has an obligation to work towards conformity and compliance with ICAO. It also is duty bound under the Act to provide regulations to permit safe aviation. And so if in fact these functions are safe as they are, CASA should have been off their asses 15 years ago in getting these reforms completed and delivered to our industry. But instead, what have they done? They've partnered up with people to abuse the industry by forcing us to pay money to external private companies for the right to do something which should be under core regulation. And that should be examined. Our senators should be examining it. It should be investigated in every respect that it can be investigated, because it is a corruption. It is a corruption of the honesty and integrity of the regulatory process to allow such things to have occurred. How do I say that? The British in the United Kingdom, the Civil Aviation Authority in the United Kingdom, or Civil Aviation Administration, whatever they're called, CAA, they've just passed all the regulations required now to permit you to own, register, maintain and operate warbirds and to fly them for reward under core UK regulation. You don't have to join an external organisation. You do a risk assessment, you submit it to the regulator and off you go. This idea that Australia's aviation industry is being sectionalised into private market monopolies is a failed concept that is actually bankrupting our industry, and it's been doing it slowly for several decades. Now, I won't harp on that because I think that I've highlighted some real key points here. The first point I just want to recap is it is patently obvious that the US Federal Aviation Administration know a little bit more than CASA. They've got more staff, more resources, more aircraft, more pilots. If there was a problem with those kinds of medical reforms, the depth of their sample pool of 88,000 far exceeds even the number of pilots we have in Australia. So if the US FAA declare it to be safe, it's safe. And to amplify that, if a manufacturer in the United States tomorrow turns around and says, we've got a problem with a Continental aircraft engine, as has just happened, and they decide to issue a service bulletin or an AD, CASA in Australia accepts it because it says, oh, we must maintain safety. If the US tell us it's safe, we must do it. Yet when the US reforms its medical system, CASA turns around and says, oh, that's not safe, we're not doing it. They can't keep picking and choosing and propagating such dishonesty. It's got to stop. They've got to start getting themselves into shape. So that touches the next topic, which came up at this estimates hearing, Mark, which was Bridget McKenzie of the Nationals asked Pip Spence, I'm aware that one of the CASA directors have completed her term in December of last year. Now, the director in question is Donna Hardman. And Donna Hardman said goodbye a month ago. I think her term finished in December, but she's departed in January. And she has moved on, and CASA now have a new director, which the minister has approved. And we heard something truly frightening at the Senate estimates hearing, truly frightening. When asked about the director departing and the need to get a new director in, they were asked what processes had been enacted. And the Director of Aviation Safety, Pip Spence, turns around and says, well, CASA's been very busy working on establishing all of the prerequisites we require in a new director, and we've done this recruitment process, which we did, and we found a candidate, and we've put the recommendation to the minister to say we want this person. Now, mate, listen, that's like holding an investigation into a series of linked murders by Jack the Ripper, and then doing an autopsy in a hospital and asking Jack the Ripper to come in and do the autopsy, right? How is it that the minister is abrogating a responsibility to ensure that directors are inserted into that board who are going to ensure that the minister's expectations on how CASA is being run and governed are being achieved? Why are we allowing nepotism, cronyism, and every other ism that can be generated by having the very people who are at the centre of the problem go and find more people to insert around them to give them a safeguard?
Yeah.
Right now, what CASA needs is not nepotism and cronyism. It needs a minister to say, hang on a minute, we're going to go and find you some directors that we, as the minister, want, so that those directors start understanding that they're there to actually drive change in the organisation that benefits the industry, not this crap we've been putting up with for such a huge amount of time, which is a parade of gas and pipeline executives, a parade of aviation consultants. I mean, I was on LinkedIn. No offence to Donna Hardman. She's probably a lovely woman. I've never met her. In all the time, 7 years I've been doing, Donna Hartman's never reached out to AOPA to say, I'm a board member of CASA. I'd like to come and meet with you guys and talk to you about CASA or gain some insights as to how you think we're running. Never once that's happened. When you jump onto LinkedIn and you read about Donna Hartman, she has an about section. And in her about section, she says, I'm a champion of change leadership. And she goes on and talks about how she's all committed to fast-paced change, whatever that means, Donna. You know, Donna, I'm extending to you right now, publicly, an invitation. I'd like you to come and join with me and sit on a live stream video and take some questions about your time on the CASA board. I'd like you to talk about your experience as being a director of CASA. And we'd love some insights into the type of issues that have occupied the board's time during your tenure, when we have continued to call for medical reform and no change has been made, and all these other issues. I don't know whether she'd take me up on that, Mark. I think she'd probably turn around and run and hide, as I'm sure most of the other CASA directors would do. They're too scared of you turn a switch on and they just suddenly disappear under the lounge suite. You know, they are invisible. And I think even Senator Mackenzie raised this in the Senate inquiry to say, what are your meeting processes? You know, what's going on with this board? So, you know, I think this is at the heart of the issue. CASA shouldn't be selecting these people. They shouldn't be setting the criterias. The Minister and Department of Infrastructure should be managing those processes, and CASA should be nowhere near it. Am I wrong, Mark?
No, I think you're exactly correct. I think this is the key problem, is that they do just go out and recruit like-minded people, and they, you know, only to serve their own benefit. You know, I mean, I know you're going to touch on the white paper, you know, moving forward, but one of the key points of the white paper is to, you know, how to support and regenerate Australia's general aviation sector. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen with the current mindset. You know, there needs to be a complete paradigm shift in the way that CASA behave, the way that CASA, you know, assess. Well, it's not so much assess, way CASA value general aviation in Australia. Until that happens, we can't move forward. And then,
Mark, there's no doubt there'll be those in CASA straight away go, oh, Ben Morgan's attacking me. I'm not attacking anybody.
No,
I'm not attacking anybody. I'm expressing the industry's frustration with what is clearly a broken process.
Yeah, and I think as members of general aviation, in general, members of general aviation, you know, surely it's acceptable for us to have a baseline expectation that CASA actually work towards doing what they're meant to do, rather than just being punitive. You know, how do we go away from these environments where, you know, superannuation funds, developers, they're more valuable to CASA than a dude flying his Cherokee 140. You know,
well, Mark, this past week I received a letter from one of our members who is in court with CASA right now, and he has laid a very serious charge, a very, very serious charge against CASA and its representatives. And he has gone on the record and is currently now before a court, and he has said that he has been subject to corruption, and he has named the persons. He has gone to extreme lengths to try and get somebody inside of CASA to take a look at it. CASA's reaction was to just get the ICC involved and deflect it. And he's now in a courtroom, and it's being battled out in the Parramatta courts. And it's going to be a very interesting process to see evolve to its final degree. But this person wrote to CASA, specifically to Pip Spence, and said, look, without prejudice, I want to meet with you. I want to sit with you and I want to show you what I've got. I want to talk to you about how broken this system is so that you can see it. And the reason he did that is he doesn't understand why he is now trapped in a system where he has to go to court and he has to fight against the entirety of the weight of CASA's legal system when he, and again, it's his, his allegation is that he believes that the representative in CASA subjected him to an outcome which was corrupt, right? So he's written to the Director of Aviation Safety and said, I just want to meet with you. I'd like to talk about it. Now, does the Director of Aviation Safety grab her legal representative and say, absolutely? CASA is supposed to have an open culture. It is supposed to have a just culture. It is supposed to be operating to the regulatory principles that are published on its website. And this is not new. There are now multiple people that I have met in my time that have tried to go to CASA to report issues and to report instances, and CASA shuts down and they go to war and they get the lawyers out and they try to bury them. And that's what's happened in this particular case. It's literally Missouri style, USS Missouri style broadside legal cannons at short range, fight to the death. And this is just a private pilot saying, hey, come and meet with me. Just look at my documents. And I would say this to Pip, again, I'm not impugning you, Pip. I like you. Why the hell won't you meet with him? Why can't you sit down with an aviator in this industry to which you hold enormous power over and sit with them and talk through the issue and find out whether there's been some wrongdoing? And if there's been wrongdoing, don't force this poor bastard to bankrupt himself fighting. Fix it. Glenn Buckley, who will be joining us, I believe, next week for a further discussion around his particular case, that's exactly what went wrong in Glenn Buckley's case. Glenn Buckley wanted to meet with CASA, the DAS. Glenn Buckley wanted to meet with the board. The board refused. The DAS refused, pushed him through the so-called ICC. And anyone that knows CASA knows that this independent complaints commissioner, not to impugn the individual, but how could this individual ever play a role of impartiality or proper investigation when he reports to the DAS? There's nothing independent about this guy. He takes his brief and he goes and have a conversation with management. Oh, so-and-so's made a complaint about so-and-so. Oh, shit, you better get organised. Let's get the team around this and fix this problem before we have to deal with it, right? This is where it's broken. The system is broken on so many levels. This system is broken. But the point I make is I fail to understand how a CEO of any organisation simply says, I'm not going to meet with someone, I don't want to hear it. Hey, you talk about just culture, you talk about fairness, you talk about safety management systems. How safe is it for the industry that you're not even prepared to listen when a pilot comes forward and says, I'm being subjected to something that shouldn't be going on? CASA are being very hypocritical in this, Mark. And I think Pip's got an opportunity to just simply open up the door, get a lawyer to come in with her and say, righto, let's sit down and have a conversation.
Well, I mean, that's the only way it's going to change. I think there wouldn't be a pilot out there that either hasn't been affected by AVMED or knows someone who's been affected by AVMED, who has, knows someone who's gone through all of the hoops and and it's all fallen on deaf ears. They've gotten all their reports. They've gotten all their information that was asked for, no matter how prescriptive it was. It provided a AVMED, and AVMED have overruled specialists, or the most learned in their field. And then these people have, as you've said, have migrated into recreational aviation in a different format. And lo and behold, planes haven't fallen out of the sky.
No.
Pilots aren't dropping over dead. Nothing's changed.
But this is the great lie, Mark. This is the great lie. When Pip Spence, Andreas, used to be Rob Walker, was Shane Carmody. Prior to that was Skidmore. You can start rattling off all these names. They have all sat in front of a Senate inquiry at some point and said, "Oh, well, senators, we have to really consider what we're doing here, because we need to understand the risks before we deliver medical reform to the aviation industry, because we've got, safety senators. They've already approved 10,000 pilots to fly around Australia on a self-declared medical, and in most cases flying the same bloody aircraft that we'd have on the VH register." So when they say this to a Senate inquiry, they are actually lying through their teeth. They are sitting there misleading the Parliament, misleading the Senate, misleading the industry, and talking out their asses because they have approved these standards to be used in aviation. They just don't want general aviation to have access to it, because it would mean pilots have a choice. They don't have to go out of the CASA system. And I think when we find this thing's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, sooner or later, medical reform is going to drop. And they've actually said at that Senate inquiry yesterday, we will deliver the medical reforms to the industry in this calendar year. So it's going to happen. How far they bastardize it, that's yet to be seen. But I tell you what a tragedy. What a tragedy for the aviation industry that thousands of people have sold aeroplanes, thousands of people have parked up aircraft. And when Pip Spence says, "Oh, we've only cancelled 100 medicals per year," BITRA have stated that half your registered aircraft fleet is no longer flying. That means half of the participation, half of the activity has stopped. Why? Let's ask the question, why? Why have people parked the aeroplanes? And I'm going to bet you, there's an old saying in Australia, isn't it? I'll bet you the left nut that you're going to find that the reason people have stopped flying is medicals are going to be a very large quantum of that.
Yeah. And I mean, someone said in the comments, I'm just having a quick flick through the comments here, yes, okay, there's 100 a year, but how many on top of that 100 are actually saying, I just can't be bothered to go through the process. Like it's too draconian. I'm not interested. I'm going to walk away, and then they walk away from the industry.
Well, Mark, the US Congress convened, and I'm going to get the exact details of this, but they convened a session, and in this particular session, the US Congress commended the US FAA on a landmark reform with Basic Med. It was recognised as a landmark reform, as not only serving to reduce red tape, serving to reduce unnecessary cost impost, but it recognised that the reforms were good for the US economy, they were good for aviation, and that they were a safe means of bringing people back. I would argue this: does CASA know more than the US Congress? CASA have been telling us now they know more than 42,000 staff of the FAA. They clearly know more than the 200,000 pilots that are flying in the United States. They clearly know more than the registered aircraft owners in the US. And I just can't, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. And I think we're at a point now where CASA's credibility is now entirely on the line. If CASA in this reform package screw the Australian public by delivering a reform that stops us flying VFR and IFR on a reformed medical, if they screw us in this reform and they deliver an outcome that doesn't permit us to fly aerobatics and all the other things, then I tell you what, CASA must put on the table the data, the evidence that they have, that they know more than the US, because if they can't, they're a laughing stock. They're a joke. And they may get their reform through that restricts the industry, but every single participant of this industry will know the truth, that they did it intentionally. They've done it to unfairly disadvantage general aviation, and they've done it because they are, to quote the senator, they are perversely incentivized to deliver reforms that don't actually give us the freedoms that we're entitled to as people seeking to fly. And, you know, I make that clear. And I'd say it to Pip Spence in a meeting right to her face. Your credibility is entirely on the line. Are you honestly going to continue this farcical lie that CASA in Australia know more than the world's most complex advanced aviation economy with the number of pilots that they've got flying? And I know they've been sending the PMO on these trips to try and learn the policy settings of other nations. And I'm telling you straight up, I reckon they're desperately out there right now trying to find a way to not deliver the total scope of the reform because they just don't want to do it. They just don't want to give pilots in this country the freedom that they deserve and they should be entitled to. And I just want to make it clear, if they screw the industry on this reform, every single pilot in this country should be going down to Aviation House and we should be standing in the foyer and we should be demanding Pip Spence to front the lot of us because it's not right. They can't keep doing this to the Australian industry. It's not right. It's time to make evidence-based regulation. It's time to stop this punitive, emotional regulatory response when the industry asks for something and just get on with getting the Australian aviation industry working. What's the harm in getting participation going and stimulating the aviation economy? Why would you want to stop this? Why would you want to achieve the opposite? I just can't understand it. And I think that everyone's on the same page.
It's a key point in their white paper. You know, that I think it's the fourth or fifth point, how to support and regenerate Australia's general aviation sector.
All right, enough on AVMED. I think I've pounded that horse well and truly.
Just one thing that does go through my mind very quickly before we move on. It would be naive. Like, I get that there are two systems in play here right now, and it's been created by CASA. They've created that landscape. It would be naive of the people that are operating currently under that different medical system, okay, to think that if change isn't affected, it's only going to be a matter of time until they come under scrutiny as well. And the things that they've paid through the nose for, all of those unique opportunities and conditions will change. And that's just how it's going to be, you know. Mate, and it's not about us and them, you know. If you're a pilot or you own an aircraft, I don't give a crap if it's a drifter. I don't care if it's a Malibu.
BD5.
BD5. Well, but it's got to fly. You'll get there. But I mean, it doesn't matter. Is it, you know? There's only one advocacy. And the other question, and I've said this to you before several times, I don't get how AOPA in America is just so supported. You know, people see it for what it is. And it's just, you know, pilots and lamies and damies and all of the other aspects of you know, the aviation industry, they get all behind this AOPA in America. And
that's because, Mark, Americans take freedom and liberty very seriously. It is ingrained in their constitution.
I'll get it.
And they are brought up with a strong sense. In Australia, we have this legacy. Yeah, we have this legacy leftover system where everyone's sitting back going, oh, we should be lucky for scraps at the table. Maybe the rum ships will arrive and they won't sink, so we'll each get a sip, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, unfortunately, is that, you know, and again, I've had this conversation with you plenty.
Sure.
No pilot out there would know another pilot that doesn't have a grievance with CASA in some form. And if you say to them, oh, you remember the AOPA? Oh, no, not really. I tried to join and it was too hard and no, I didn't do it. And well, don't complain. You know, if you want to complain and you want to establish some change, then it's simple. Just get on board.
Absolutely.
You know, we're not asking for a firstborn here. You don't have to donate a kidney. You know, it's for $159.
I wouldn't donate that kidney. You'll get grounded.
Hey?
Don't donate the kidney. You'll get grounded.
Yeah, that's right. You get the point. You know, for less than a tank of avgas, you know, you can get on board, and you know, I fly 182.
Mate, I know, you get it. Okay, last issue which we need to tap on, and we're running a little bit over scale. I've done well. I've got an hour and 10 minutes out of you tonight.
Sorry,
right.
mate,
We're on the final run. That is the Aviation White Paper, and I'm very pleased to announce that the Department of Infrastructure, in their wisdom, have reached out to AOPA and have asked us to contribute as part of the Aviation White Paper review and consultation process. Now, I have to say, obviously, as we always say, thank you. Whenever we are invited to participate in these processes, the answer is thank you. Of course, we want to contribute. We want to be able to advocate for our national membership and for our industry, so we will do that. However, Mark, I have to say from the outset of this, $7 million of Australian taxpayer money to undertake what is basically the 1988 Back to the Future, GMC or DMC DeLorean of policy review. We've done this under the Albanese government. The white paper was done during the last Labor term. It was a great reason for the Labor Party to defer any policy settings for almost 3.5 years. It's a rerun of that same playbook, which is it'll delay the government basically making any announcements. It guarantees the Minister, Catherine King MP, won't have to come out and do anything controversial for the next 3 years. She'll just say, well, we're doing a white paper and we're waiting for people to get back to us. It's a very clever piece of political masterstroke, which is how to do something when you're doing nothing and make it look like you're doing everything. The problem is we're awake to it. We've seen this before, and it's just a crying shame that the government, at the snap of a finger, says, let's spend $7 million on what will end up being a parade of nepotist quango consultants to produce a bloody report that at the end of the day is only going to say what the GA inquiry said, and is only going to say what the last 5 Senate inquiries have said. It's only going to reiterate what the Forsyth Review has said, and it will only confirm everything that AOPA has been saying for nearly 6.5, 7 years. And in fact, Anthony Albanese attended AOPA's landmark General Aviation Summit, which we ran back in 2017. Again, not a lot of people realise AOPA put together what was the largest General Aviation Summit that has ever been held in Australia, and we brought together all of the industry leadership to Wagga, where the Deputy Prime Minister was based. And we ran a summit there, and Anthony Albanese came along as the Shadow Transport Minister, and he made an undertaking at that summit. He said that he felt that many of the findings and the outcomes of the summit were significant and needed to be addressed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send a letter to Anthony Albanese and Catherine King together, and I'm going to remind the Prime Minister that he actually made an undertaking that there were a significant number of findings from that AOPA summit that needed to be picked up and moved forward. And we're going to see if he'll honour his word or whether he's going to become a politician and simply dump the issues and run. But secondly, in sitting with that, if you really want to stimulate general aviation and you want to put the industry on track for the next 10 to 15 years, why don't we put the $7 million into apprenticeship training? Why don't we put the $7 million into getting young kids into the trades? Why don't we put the $7 million into assisting flight schools get instructors back up to speed? Why don't we do all of the things that need to be done at the grassroots, which are glaringly obvious, and put the $7 million and in fact go beyond? Let's not limit it to $7 million. Why don't you put up a $30 or $40 million industry stimulus package? Yeah. And instead of giving it to the bloody airlines, right, who are going to go buy new 737s, right? How about you give the general aviation industry, which everybody in the aviation industry is relying on, why don't you give a stimulus package and call on organisations like AOPA, the Sport Aircraft Association, and everybody else in the industry's leadership, and sit us around a table and say, how do we spend the money in a way in which it creates jobs, it creates economic benefit, and it creates thrust for the industry to get us back to takeoff power? Because that's what's going to make a change. This white paper, I'll tell you what we should do with the white paper. We should find a cardboard roll about that big and wrap the white paper on it and hang it in the dunny, because it's not going to do anything. It's just going to be another speaking point for politicians to say, oh, well, we put together a white paper and identified that general aviation is an important sector to the aviation community and more needs to be done to underpin general aviation activity. It's what they said last time, but they did nothing about it. It seems that the problem with the Australian government is that it's been all talk, no action. It's time for action. We have to get to takeoff power if this industry is going to fly. Over to you.
Yeah, I agree. It's, you know, you and I could do it for less than $7 million.
Well, mate, I mean, I'm telling you now, I can see them. The aviation consultants are all sitting out there right now.
Yeah,
going,
they're waiting.
How do we get in on? Thank you, AOPA. Thank you for making all this noise and the government announcing this. This is $7 million of free money. You know, it's shameful.
I think there could be. Yeah, I get around a little bit and I go to a few lamies and I see a few different workshops and places, and there's very few apprentices. Most of the really skilled guys are old and wanting to get out of the industry at some point. I mean, my lamie, he's got an apprentice and he's probably one of the few. I'd actually like to know how many apprentices there are in the industries and what mechanisms there are within, TAFE for training these young guys to come in, whether it be airframe or avionics or power plants, but I don't see much young people. You know what I see a lot of? Young pilots pulling beers.
Well, mate, another problem at Bankstown, Mark, which I'll just touch on the engineering side. As many people know on Facebook, I've put it out there. I'm building this crazy little BD5J jet. You've seen it in the hangar. We call it the rocket in Skunk Works corner. I'm building this little aeroplane. I've got to get some aviation. And the mini. I've got to get these aviation. I've got to get these aviation parts welded up, right? And it's steel, 4130 steel or something, and you basically got to get all these weldments together. So I go over and I see aviation welding at Bankstown Airport, and the guy that's in there is being effectively priced off the aerodrome. He, speaking honestly with me, he says, mate, I don't have that much longer. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to walk away. There's no one left. There is no one left. Who in New South Wales is doing certified aviation welding?
No.
We lose this guy. We lose such a huge chunk of support, and this is the thing that I think is outstanding. You've got these bureaucrats at the Department of Infrastructure. Oh, we're putting up $7 million for an aviation white paper, and it's going to solve the problems of aviation through to 2050. You're not going to make it to 2050. Your technical skills and trades that you need are leaving the industry. You need to do something to fix that now. This is like, honestly, this is like someone coming along, government official coming along alongside the Titanic. It's hit the iceberg. It's taken on water at a phenomenal rate, and he gets on board and he says to the captain, "Look, we're thinking of doing a study into icebergs and how you avoid them, and it's going to chart the course for marine navigation for the next 30 years." Yeah, it's okay, mate. Hang around for another couple of hours and see how that consultation works out.
And look, manufacturing, having been in the manufacturing industry most of my life, it's no different. It's no different. You can't employ apprentices now. It's too difficult to employ apprentices. The money isn't there. Personally, I'm really quite passionate about this as a tradesman. I think every tradesman has an obligation to put an apprentice through. I think it's about paying back to what was given you, the opportunity that was given you. I've put 3 apprentices through, and I'm really proud of all those 3 guys, but probably won't do any more. And you go to these lamies and you see these guys, they just don't have the apprentices. The work's not there. The margins aren't there. The rent's massive. They can't afford the overheads are, absolutely choking them to bits. And all they can think of, they go from how do I create a future for either my name or my business or my apprentices or whatever, to how do I make it to retirement and then leave? Because there's nothing left for these guys,
And it's staggering, Mark. You go to the US, as I've just recently done, and I went out all over Las Vegas visiting airfields, and I was saying, I met with Bankstown. Well, they're not called Bankstown Airport anymore. They're called Area Management. They don't want people to be confused. They run airports. They took it out of the name. Area Management. Went and sat down with Daniel Jarosz, the CEO, the other day, and we were talking about my trip abroad. And I said to him, Daniel, in Las Vegas alone, all of the airports, and there's multiple, I think it's 3 or 4 airports in that Las Vegas area, every single airport is the size of Bankstown Airport times 2, right? Their smallest general aviation aerodrome was bigger than Bankstown Airport and was covered in aeroplanes, covered in hangars, covered in T-stands, right? And we went out and we met with these at these airports, and we met people from the airports. Different attitude. The airports are working with the general aviation community. They're trying to build facilities. They're trying to make things work for them. We're sitting here at Bankstown Airport as aviation businesses, and I'm going to be careful what I say here, but we're at Bankstown Airport. We're trying to negotiate external to AOPA. People do know that I'm involved with Falcon Air. We've got that corporate jet charter and maintenance repair organisation, right? But we're trying to, and we're trying to negotiate facilities at Bankstown Airport, and we're sitting there in their new corporate offices that they've spent millions of dollars on, right? And people are in hangars. They can't get doors fixed. They can't get gutters fixed. They can't get buildings tidied up. And and Daniel's going to get the shit straight away because he's going to go, "Oh, Ben, you're criticising me." Okay, Daniel, look, I get it. I'm trying to be as mild as I can. But here we are at this situation at an airport where we sit down and say we want to build, or we want to move, or we want to expand. Oh, there's no space. Mate, you just built $1 billion southern real estate development the size of a suburb on the south side of our airport and turned it into non-aviation. And now you're saying there's no room to put aviation on the airport. We've got no expansion room. I mean, it's scandalous what's gone on at these airports, right? And again, how has it happened? It's happened because we have had a government so weak, so incompetent. And I'm sorry to the people. There are good people that work inside of CASA, and there's good people who work inside of the Department of Infrastructure, and there's good people who work, politically around the government. It's time to start owning up and realising that the failure with respect to airports has been so profound that it has actually really damaged our industry. And you can never solve a problem until you recognise you've got a problem. And it's really time that the Department of Infrastructure comes clean with itself and says, we've actually got a major problem here, and we start talking about it. How are we going to fix it? How are we going to get some equity back into aviation to ensure we can have buildings and facilities where it's necessary? And it's a bleak future when you look at these challenges. But by God, Mark, how lucky are we? We've got AOPA, and that we're not afraid of the fight. And every day we get out of bed saying, let's go beat our heads against the wall some more.
Let's hope there's a lot of people out there, listening to us thinking, geez, that bearded dude's going to come and harass me now. And,
Okay, we're going to wrap this up. It's we're now 1 hour and 21 minutes. Mark, it's been great having you come along and talk and introduce yourself and chat. It's been at the same time I've done a lot of talking, and no doubt people say Ben Morgan spoke more than Mark. That's not abnormal. I'm told I could talk a submarine out of the water. But it's all great stuff. I think, I've always said this. We need to be a catalyst for conversation. We need to be a catalyst for debate. We need to be talking about these issues. And I meant what I said earlier about our outgoing CASA board member, Donna Hardman. Donna, if you get the message via LinkedIn, I welcome you to come and talk to us. I would think it would be wonderful for a board member to come and sit publicly and answer questions about what it's like to be a director of CASA and the issues that CASA is facing. And ultimately, I would say this: we are the Australian taxpayer. CASA is our regulator. Don't we deserve to know what's going on inside of our regulator? And I find it funny, and I'll just make a couple of comments in relation to this. I find it really funny that the CASA board treat their meetings as confidential, and you're not allowed to know what goes on in these meetings. What does CASA do that's so confidential? Yeah. Why are they doing anything that's secretive? It should be open and transparent. We should have full visibility of what goes on in these board meetings. The board meetings we should be able to log in and watch the board meetings. If something needs to be discussed at a CASA board meeting that is private, they can go in camera like every other professional public organisation does, like your local council does. You can go to your council meetings. You can see what's going on. If they need to discuss something that's to do with a particular person, they go in camera, you wait, they come back, and of course the board reports are public for people to review. Isn't it time the Australian taxpayer got to see under the hood of CASA and what the hell's going on in that organisation? I'll tell you what, everybody, on behalf of our national membership in the aviation industry, this is something that I'm going to start really making noise about. We should be allowed to see what is going on inside of that organisation so we can see, are the board members doing their job? Are they actually doing the job that they receive money from the taxpayer from? Because don't forget that, girls and guys out there, we're paying for these people. They're each receiving a chunk of money to be a director. and we don't get to see anything that's going on. They operate in total secrecy, and we should be asking the question why. They're not dealing with national security. They're not dealing with defence. They're civil. It's the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. We should be able to see what's going on inside of the Civil Aviation regulator, because frankly, they shouldn't be handling anything that is top secret or in the nation's defence. And I think to that point, they were asked in this last Senate estimates whether they've got contingency planning and procedures and policies in place for these balloons that are popping up everywhere. And I have to say, I was chuckling to myself when I saw Pip Spence responding saying, yes, Senator, we have robust procedures in place that we activate straight away. And the Senator said, what are those procedures? I'll have to get back to you on that.
Maybe they can employ some verbs.
I'll have to get back to you on that. But the Senator's like, hang on, you said there's procedures. Oh, well, yes, they're well-proven procedures.
Yeah.
Bit of fun for everybody. Mark, thank you so much. I'm going to drop you off now. I really do appreciate you joining us. That's fantastic.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, mate. Well, there you go, everybody. Marc Sibun, new director of AOPA Australia. He's a bloody legend. He's a great guy to hang out with. He's a very passionate aviator, and he cares a great deal, not only about the AOPA organisation, but the future of Australia's general aviation industry. He's been someone that I very much appreciated the personal support from as well since he has become involved. And importantly, I say this at the end of every single video that we run. If you like the work that AOPA Australia is doing, and we are doing a huge amount of work in advocating for change, we really do invite you to become a member. It's $159 to join AOPA, and we invite you to follow the Bendigo Aero Club and others. Jump online, become a member. If you can't jump online, drop us a line. You can call me on my mobile phone number, which is published everywhere, or you can send me an email to ben.morgan@aopa.com.au. I will try and get back to you. Keep in mind, AOPA at the moment, we don't have any administration staff working in support. It's myself and the board that are trying to handle everything. But we really do want you to get involved with AOPA and back and support what we're up to. After all, if we succeed, we deliver you a better, more sustainable, more successful general aviation community. And that has got to be something that's worth $159 every day of the week. So please jump online, pledge your support, stand with us as we take this push forward. And with that, I really do thank everybody for tuning in. I thank everyone that's going to get to see this video over the coming couple of weeks when you get time to tune into it as well. We are making a strong effort to make sure the broadcasts happen every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. to give some structure to these. It's a wonderful opportunity to meet people, hear a real down-to-earth, straight-shooting conversation on aviation issues that matter. Now, if you would like an issue to be discussed, if there are things that you would like to have raised in these conversations, shoot an email to ben.morgan@aopa.com.au and I'll see to it gets on the agenda. Maybe you would like to join us for a panel discussion and talk about aviation issues that are important to you. And you are absolutely welcome to do this. I'd love to have you come and join us on a panel and talk about things that you think in the aviation industry need to be addressed, or it might be you disagree with the things that AOPA are saying and you would like to counter us live on camera and put your view forward. You're also absolutely welcome to do it. We're not afraid of the debate, and we certainly encourage the conversation. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. And until next time, it's Ben Morgan, Chief Executive of AOPA Australia. Thank you.